Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we're actually talking about cryptocurrency because I'm asking the question, is cryptocurrency sustainable in the long term? And oh Lord, I'm just gonna get hate mail on this. I'm so looking forward to that from people that didn't actually bother to listen to this or hear this, and they're just making up their mind on the title alone. I just know it. I'm looking forward to that. I'm gonna read those. Now, here's what's going on. This is coming from the New York Times. Now, cryptocurrencies obviously have emerged as this new investment, this very interesting investment, oftentimes a very puzzling investment as we've seen over the years. They soar in value. They crash. If you recall, a few years ago, people were mortgaging their houses when cryptocurrency got to almost 20,000. Then it crashed like a stone. Now it's back up. I mean, it's just everything around it is just very interesting as it's a speculative currency. Now, their fans claim, or rather cryptocurrencies fans claim, that they're going to displace traditional currencies like the yen or the dollar or, take your pick and all of that. And in the process of simply existing, cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, for example, which is the largest one out there, are using an absolutely insane amount of energy. And that's what we're going to be talking about here. Now, this usage is basically around 0.5% of the entire electricity consumed in the world, and that has increased tenfold in just the past 5 years. And Bitcoin and cryptocurrency has been around forever. The Bitcoin network alone uses the same amount of electricity as the entire state of Washington does annually. That is a ton of electricity. Now, if you don't know much about cryptocurrency yourself, or you have never mined this, you might be asking yourself, why on earth is this so energy intensive? Now, I think the New York Times had a pretty good breakdown of this, and so I'm going to be quoting them almost verbatim at this. Now, all Bitcoin transactions are openly accounted for in what is known as a public ledger, and anybody can actually examine this. And new Bitcoins would be created as a reward to participants for helping maintain that vast, sprawling computerized ledger. But the ultimate supply of Bitcoins would be limited. The idea was that the growing demand over time would basically increase the Bitcoin value. Now, all around the world, companies and individuals known as Bitcoin miners are essentially competing to be the one that actually validates a transaction and enters it into the blockchain or the public ledger for this transaction, basically meaning that they are getting a Bitcoin for that. They're basically playing essentially a guessing game using very powerful and very power-hungry computers essentially to try to beat others to unlocking that, to understanding that, to calculating that. Now, because if they are successful, as I mentioned, they get a Bitcoin, and that's worth a lot of money. Now, the competition for newly created Bitcoins is called mining. That's essentially it in a nutshell, and I think that was a very good nerd to English translation by the New York Times. So basically, the more power that your computer has, the more guesses you can quickly make. And the Bitcoin network is designed to make the guessing game more and more difficult as more miners participate, as more coins are generated. Obviously, that puts a premium on very powerful and power-hungry computers and servers. That's why Bitcoin miners now have warehouses packed with powerful computers, basically moving as fast as they can to guess these massive numbers, and they're consuming a tremendous amount of energy in the process. So, mining continues to consume more and more power as coins are essentially found, because every time a Bitcoin is essentially unlocked and added to the ledger, it becomes harder to get the next one. Now think about this like gold. Actual gold that you would wear or put in something. There is a finite amount of gold in the world. We actually have to dig into the earth to mine it. And as we mine it, excavate it, and continue to use it, there's less in the world for us to essentially get, and therefore the price goes up. But we also have to dig deeper. We need more equipment. We need more cost to basically mine that gold. And so think about it this way. In the early days of Bitcoin, when it was worth basically nothing, when it very first started, anybody with just a home computer could easily mine at home. I actually knew people that did that. They would get a few coins a day or whatever it was. And obviously, as time went on, it got harder. And today, you need highly specialized machines, a ton of money, and a ton of space, big enough and basically to sustain all of this, plus cooling power to actually keep these running, at a very high pace without actually overheating. That's why mining happens now in giant data centers, and they're typically owned by people, like groups of people or corporations. Now, operations have consolidated so much that only 7 mining groups own nearly 80% 80% of all of the computing power in the network. Mining happens all over the world, but usually it happens when there's an abundance of cheap energy. So, for example, for years, much of Bitcoin mining was actually done in China. Although recently, China has actually started cracking down on Bitcoin mining because it's consuming so much of China's power. Researchers at the University of Cambridge, who have basically been tracking Bitcoin mining, said recently that China's global share of Bitcoin, their mining, has fallen 46% in April, which is from 75% in late 2019. So they are dropping like a rock. The United States, for example, is at 16%, and now we're basically from 4%. So it's a huge thing to essentially consume all of this. Now, Bitcoin mining also means more than just these emissions that this power consumption, creates. Hardware is piling up as well. Everyone wants the newest and fastest machinery so they can be the first to get to that hard to get Bitcoin now, and that is causing a very high turnover, and therefore it is causing a much larger e-waste problem than we have previously seen. There are estimates that every year and a half or so, the computational power of mining doubles. That's known as Moore's Law. And it's making those older machines obsolete because every time, again, a new coin is made, it gets harder and harder and harder, which means the calculations get more intense, which means you need more firepower, which means you need more power. And according to calculations, at the start of 2021, Bitcoin alone was generating more e-waste. Just Bitcoin was generating more e-waste than many mid-sized countries because people were turning it over so fast to continue to try to mine these things. So, is this sustainable in the long run in terms of power consumption? We're going to find out, quite frankly, is the answer. And, the New York Times had their own conclusions in all of this, but we are looking at alternative sources for green energy, such as, wind power, ocean power, all of these things. But we also have to understand that outside of Bitcoin, which is right now a very niche thing, not everybody's invested in this. Obviously it's growing. People are taking a hard look at this. But we also have a very vast growing population of humans around the globe that have basic needs, and that is electricity. Personal computing devices. We have almost 4 billion people on the internet now as we are looking at this, and they need computers. They need these things, obviously not the high performance machines that Bitcoin needs, but this is supply that we need, which means as we are mining the gold and the other precious rare earth metals for these machines, now we're competing against Bitcoin or simply basic human need. Not to mention cars and everything else, and we're walking into buildings that require this as well. So, is this vast computing power that is turning over, in less than 2 years as it's doubling, as essentially we're throwing things out, is that sustainable? Is there a recycling program for these things? Can these be converted into, the specialized equipment be converted into other uses that, it may not be good for Bitcoin, but it might be good for a home computer or something else that it can be used for? Or are we going to continue to consume just an absolute amount of electricity to simply have cryptocurrency compete with a traditional currency? I don't have a good answer for you. I've always found Bitcoin to be very fascinating, very interesting. I've got some Bitcoin myself. I've never mined. It's never really been my thing. But like anybody, it's an investment. And so this is a very interesting problem, and I think we're just going to be running into a bit of a quagmire here with this that we really need to understand and we really need to figure out. Because if we're letting this go willy-nilly, are we potentially exhausting a supply that could be used to actually sustain human beings? Or are we going to find new alternatives, to this solution for energy, and therefore we can mine Bitcoin and any cryptocurrency to our heart's content without running into these problems in the future, not to mention the e-waste stuff. How are we recycling? How are we using these things? It's a huge problem that we're running into. But when you are looking at just one of the thousands of cryptocurrencies out there, and it happens to be the biggest, using the electricity from the entire state of Washington, for 1 year, is what Bitcoin is essentially equal to right now. And it's growing, so it will be outpacing the state of Washington sooner than later. That has to be addressed. That has to be talked about. And I'm not hating on cryptocurrency at all. It's a great technology and all of these things. But are we doing the world a service in the long run by doing it in this way? And I think that's a question that needs to be answered. So love it or hate it, I'm looking forward to your hate mail, but that is your news of the day. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And for the record, you can send me hate mail at all of those places. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.